the DPPs for SuperCoach 2024. It's George from Fantasy Take TV. So I have a list of, I don't know how many, but all the DPPs from every club, and I'd like to go over who I think is relevant and who I'm interested in for next year and whatnot. Just discuss a fair few of them. So excited to start getting some content out there and even talking about SuperCoach. It's been already 3 months since SuperCoach ended, so that's flown pretty quick. But I think the free picker should open roughly in about 3 to 4 weeks, going by when it's open in the past rather. So that's exciting. Before I touch on the DPPs, I want to speak on round 0. So just looking around on Twitter mainly and some other forums, it's a bit concerning that obviously Herald Sun are in a tough position of how they deal with round 0, but a lot of people are saying that they might not even bother playing SuperCoach if round 0 doesn't go their way, or if the player doesn't like how Herald Sun have done with it, they won't play and whatnot. People are just getting a little frustrated. So the way I would probably approach it if I was the Herald Sun after rethinking it is I'd probably go as simple as possible, which is what AFL Fantasy is doing. And while it might not be the most competitive way of dealing with it, I think it's just less frustration. So I would skip round 0 altogether, pretend it doesn't exist, and then start from round 1. It does mean that like your Tom Greens and your Gordons and your Dunkley, there's no point. You can't really start these players, unfortunately, but I think it's just how it is, and I would reduce the trade count just because I think that's what SuperCoach is at its core. It's been given too many recently, but that's another story. I think COVID had something to do with that too. So that's how I would go about it. But yeah, hopefully the Herald Sun are coming up with a plan. Anyway, we'll start on the DPP. So we'll start off with the mighty Adelaide Crows, and they're training the house down. I don't know if you read on Twitter, but 38 of 41 players ran a PB. Okay, but that's enough of that. So looking at this list here, I think there's 2 relevant players. So Billy Dowling is a accumulating midfielder. I don't know if he gets games or not, but there's a few. I think Schoenberg's done his ACL or Achilles, one of the two. I can't remember. And Sloan is still getting decent CBAs, so there might be an opportunity for another midfielder. It could be Rochelle or Saligo. They get more time in there, but there's certainly a best 22 spot available because Schoenberg did his ACL in round 23. Sorry, Achilles, I think it was. So he's one to watch, and you might be able to field him if things go his way. So keep an eye on Dowling in the preseason, but yeah, he's a rookie, so big junior numbers. Charlie Edwards, I don't think will play early. A lot of development left in him, kind of like your tall mid. His accumulation ability isn't super high at the moment. I think he was getting about 20 touches a game, so I think he's a bit of a way off. And then you got Dan Curtin as well, so the prize draft pick for the Crows. I was doing cartwheels in my lounge room when the Crows traded up for him. I was so happy to get like an S-tier talent in Curtin because a lot of draft power rankings had him, top 3, top 5, so really happy with him. Sounds like he wants to play down back or start down back, but I'm not sure how he fits in. So he's about a 170, 175k defender mid. Probably need him in defense. So I think he's a reasonable chance to play round 1. So one to keep an eye on for sure. Is he worth paying up for? Depends on what else is available. So averaged 100 in the under 18s or whatever WA comp he played in. So that's pretty good. So can intercept, can rebound as well, which is nice. Chase Jones plays on a wing, so not relevant. So moving on to Brisbane. First few names here, not relevant. We'll skip to Dev Robertson. So he's roughly 250k in the forward line. And one thing to note is a lot of these players that have got DPP have a lot of sub-affected games, and Dev has a few, I think. So he's just signed with Brisbane. He chose to not go home to West Coast. Yeah, signed with Brisbane. For less money, from memory. But there is no Will Ashcroft next year, or for most of next year, and they chose to play Lions, I think, a little bit, or the Lions was sub as well, but yeah, they didn't really throw Dev in the guts, and he's averaged 110 in the VFL in the midfield, so just depends on whether, is it his time now to play midfield. I think they put Bailey in there as well, gave him a bit of time, so put McLuggage more in the midfield as well. So is Dev going to get decent CBAs? I'm not sure, but he didn't get it last year even when Ashcroft went down late towards the end of the year. So Dev is, I'm interested in him for 250k in the forward line. Just depends if he gets the role or not. But yeah, with no Ashcroft, the opportunity could be there. Zorko's probably too old, and I don't know who this is, so I'll move on. No real relevance in Carlton. Cottrell, I believe, is a winger, and I've never heard of Billy Wilson. Moving on to Collingwood. So we've got Nick Dacos here, who's worth talking about because if he has the round 0 game, which means he has an early bye, and he also has Finn McGuinness, I believe, in round 4. So this makes the Dacos pick a bit interesting. I think when I open SuperCoach, after a day, his ownership, I guess, would be 55 to 60%, regardless of the bye and the tag. But I can see a few people, if he does, if we don't play round 0, I can see a few people skipping Dacos because of the bye and the Finn McGuinness tag. I'll be honest, I don't really care about Finn McGuinness tag or bye. I'm starting Nick Dacos. I think he'll be an early captain option for us, and he has an injury game priced into him. Anyone who didn't have Dacos early last year, I think, probably wanted to quit. So I think he's a defender available, injury priced into him. He's just, would have won the Brownlow if he didn't get injured in his second year. He's a freak talent. So I'll pick Dacos, whatever. He's not going to move from my team for the pre-season. Now we look at Essendon. There's some intrigue here. So Caudle, I don't think, gets enough mid-minutes, or scores enough, rather. And Sardis is an accumulating midfielder, but he was injured last year for a fair chunk of the first half of the year. And got a little bit of mid-time, not much. So obviously being the mid-forward, you got Parrish, you got Zach Merritt, you have Hobbs, Perkins, Cordwell, Stringer when he's healthy, but his middays might be done given his body. So he's Sardis is pretty cheap, around the 250, 260 mark in the forward line, something like that. So he's, if the role is there, he's worth watching because he'll actually get a full preseason. But I think they prioritise Hobbs a bit more. They got Gresham as well that's come to the club. It might not be his role yet, but I think he's worth watching because the talent is there and he can accumulate. Had a few sub scores in there, so he'll go up in price, but will it be enough to justify the pick? It depends on the role. So we'll keep an eye on him. Oh, Nick Cox as well. I don't know what he's priced at, but I feel like he hasn't played for a while. If he's a cheaper price, he could be looked at, but not sure. His rate of improvement hasn't been good the past few years. So if he's a good price, we'll watch that, but I can't be bothered checking at the moment. I'll move on to Fremantle. Luke Jackson I don't think he's a starting pick just with Sean Darcy. I can't justify that sort of price tag. I think he's priced in the 90s somewhere. If something happens to Darcy, he's probably your first picked in the forward line. So I think it's just he becomes relevant when Darcy's out of the team. Do they want him in the ruck? Do they want him in the midfield? I'm not sure. I think most likely forward for now, but can sort of play anywhere, but we'll keep an eye on that. And then Nat Fyfe, I think after last year, it's an odd decision to re-sign him because they don't need him in the midfield and he's cooked anyway. And they figured out he's not a forward. So I think that was a very bad call to sign him for how great he is. He's just got like a 2-year deal that just doesn't make sense. So I think that everyone can sort of see it was a bad call, but regardless, been a champion of the game. Moving on to Geelong. Sean Manor, so averaged 110 in the VFL, kicking almost 2 goals a game. So I assume he's played mid and forward, or obviously mid forward here, but a fair bit forward. I think you chuck him at F6 if he's named round 1. Do they stop playing Rowan? I'm trying to think. They lost Selwood. I can't think of any other retirements. Actually, Selwood's been gone for a year, so I don't know what I'm talking about there. But Yeah, I'm not too sure what their forward line looks like at the moment. They got like Close and Messi. What's his name? Brian Myers. So I don't know where he fits in, but if there's a spot there for him, I think you play him at F6. Yeah, I think you want him on field because he'll make a stack of money for us. Kicked like 6 goals in the VFL Grand Final, so pretty good. And then I don't know who these players. I don't know who that is. Humphreys, and then Mark O'Connor's the tag. I don't know if he's best 22 or not. Moving on to the Gold Coast Suns. So Marnie's been picked up as a small forward. I think they've got plenty small forwards. So they recruited Tom Berry. He couldn't really get a consistent game. So I don't know what they see in Marnie, but hopefully he can revive his career. So Flanders is the first picked in my team, or most teams, I think. Just clear F1 at the moment. We saw him pump out a 150 in the last round. Might have been fantasy score 150, but regardless, can accumulate no tomorrow. And he's one where he just somehow didn't have the role and basically forced his way in to get the mid-time. And CBAs weren't always super high as well, so I think he would actually be the best scorer. If everyone got equal mid-time, I think Flanders will outscore Took, Rao and Anderson just by watching him last year. Just has incredible knack to bob up and find the football, and yeah, really good clearance player too. So he'll be the first picked. Even if he doesn't get max mid-time, he still should be F1. So he's a lock for me. And what will be interesting is if you play draft, well, where does Flanders go in draft? And I dare say he could go pick 1. So anyway, moving on. You got Davies here who can play mid, but just doesn't accumulate enough. So I don't know how they fit him into the team. You got Jeffrey, might play down back, apparently. I've heard. Not sure what sort of role down back. Is it a rebounding? Is it a lockdown? I don't know. So if he's playing down back, you could watch him, but yeah, don't think he'll be relevant, but we'll see. Moving on to the Giants. So main one here is Isaac Cumming. And well, he's sort of a wingman. He could even be sub. I just think they've signed Himmelberg and it's kind of kicked him out of the defence because they've opted to play Perryman back there as well. So look, he's priced in the 70s. He can do 90 plus comfortably in the right role, but it would take injuries and shifting magnets around. So I think it's worth watching if injuries happen around him. Otherwise, I can see him continuing his role from 2023. Hawthorn got Denver Granger Barras, who is not relevant. Melbourne have probably no relevance here. I guess Gus Brayshaw, if he goes in the midfield after, if he gets cheap or something due to injuries or something, could be relevant at some point, but no, not a long-term solution for our teams. Windsor was their top draft pick, I think. I don't know anything about him, to be honest. Moving on to North Melbourne. So Zane Duursma here, mid-forward, 190-ish K. I think it's going to be too much for Duursma. Doesn't seem to have much of a contested game, but yeah, from watching highlights of him, really good overhead. And can get up the ground, can go into the midfield a little bit. At this stage, it's a no. I just don't think the role will be good enough to justify 190k in the forward line. But if the forward line is quite bare and he's got good job security, you could look at him. But yeah, he was in my last team update and I've taken him out. So he's a no at this stage. But yeah, these young draftees, just monitor their pre-seasons. Not much else here. Lazaro can play mid, but I don't know. He seems to be on the outer, or if he needs a spot, he might be on the wing. So yeah, just seems back in the pecking order. Moving on to Port. Don't know who these two players are. And you got Mead, who got games a few years ago and did okay, but yeah, just no real room in that midfield. Butters, Rosie, Horn-Francis. You got Wines there. I don't know who else is in there. Drew. So yeah, there's no room to have a high midfield role. So probably a no for Mead. Moving on to Richmond. Samson Ryan, if he gets the ruck role, if something happens to Nank, because they have lost Soldo, Ryan could be relevant at some point, so that's worth watching, but otherwise, not relevant if Nank is fit. And Shea Bolton, this is interesting. So where does the coach want to play him? They've got the new coach now, and Uze, the interim coach, decided to play him a fair bit midfield, and he scored okay. He's got the high ceiling, but he's also got the terrible floor. I don't know what it is with Bolton. For fantasy, I just can't trust him. So he's a pick that I'm just not interested in, because I honestly feel like he could go on a run of 120s or a run of 60s. So I don't want none of that, to be honest. So he's a no for me. And you got Baker. He just missed a fix-it. So he's a no for Baker. Although I think he wants to play down back. So that's that. Moving on to the Saints. So Max Heath is a young development ruck. If Marshall goes down and Heath develops a bit, Heath could be relevant. So I think for him to be relevant, something has to happen to Marshall. So keep an eye on his development on the preseason. But Marshall generally plays most, if not all, games. Darcy Wilson was there might have been their first pick in the draft. I think he went around 20, so apparently really good character, really good, hard worker, averaged 100 plus in the under 18s, and more of an outside midfielder. So he could be a bench spot if he plays round 1, but I don't know if he plays round 1. So see how he comes across in the preseason, but it could be a bench option for us. So probably not confident enough to play him on field unless he does some great things in the preseason. But one to just monitor. You got Winhager here. There's a few pictures obviously going around that he'd be pretty happy with it anyway. But is he playing mid? Is he playing defense? I think he's going to be a bit expensive, into the 300s, or it might be 350 or something. So 350, you want almost keeper potential and really, really good SuperCoach friendly role, because we know that they can throw him in as a tagger. Does he play? If he's playing down back, then he's sharing with Wanganeen, Miller and Sinclair. I think there's too much sharing to pick him. So if things align, it could work, but probably a no. So we'll move on to the Swans. So Hayden McLean, so they've got Grundy now, so McLean can't be relevant really, but I thought his ruck work was not bad. Taylor Adams, I think he's around the low 400s as a forward. So interesting one. Not really interested at this point for me. I just think he's must be in his 30s now. Really injury prone. I think he played all games this year until he did his some sort of soft tissue towards the end of the year, but his soft tissue history is pretty bad, unfortunately for him. And his even when he was getting CBAs in 2022, his scoring wasn't super high, but I think Collingwood as a whole just weren't scoring. So is it worth the durability risk? And what Sydney have done is they've gone out and recruited Adams and James Jordan when they've got their midfield right there. So I don't really understand the strategy. They've got Mills, they've got Sheldrick, they've got Parker, Chad Warner. They've put Papley in there a lot. I don't know if they want to continue doing that. So maybe it made sense to grab one of them. They got Matt Roberts as well. I'm sure I'm missing some players too. Rowbottom is a limited player from watching him, so I would personally put him in the 2s, but that's just me. So I don't know how they fit Adams and Jordan into the midfield. I don't know. So Adams moved because he wants to play midfield, and then James Jordan, I assume, wants to play midfield too. That's where he's been playing in the VFL. So Adams low 400s forward. He's a no for me. Too injury prone and unsure what the mid-time will be. James Jordan's 270-ish K. Scored really, really well in the VFL. So if he can lock down a spot in the midfield, I think it's worth looking at. So one, I'll monitor. But, is he actually good inside a bit at AFL level? I haven't really seen it. So see how he goes. Campbell is playing wing, I think, but he could move to halfback at some point. So he's a pass. And the West Coast Eagles will touch on. There's a few relevant players here. Not too sure on a lot of these draftees up here, but we'll start with Harley Reid. I think he'll be the most owned player in fantasy and SuperCoach. 210k forward eligible. Might need some time to build up his take, but yeah, pretty impressive highlights. Kicking goals from anywhere, and he's got the fend off and the burst from stoppage. So he looks a good prospect. Has been injured, so certainly not anticipating Walsh or Ashcroft or Dacos numbers. But if he can do 70 for us, probably more Horne-Francis numbers. So if he can do 70 for us, he'll split his time between mid and forward, I'd imagine. So you take that for 200k. So hopefully he can make us some decent money. You got Cully, who's quite cheap. I'm not sure Cully will be an inside mid. They can use him forward, but he's done his ACL. He's 180k, so he might be a downgrade option later in the year if all goes well. And then Elijah Hewitt mid forward, 250k or 240k. Had a lot of sub games in there. So he's one where I think the midfield role is just right in front of him, and it's theirs if he's already had it actually in 2023. He just hasn't scored super well. He shown a lot of really good signs, but the tank clearly is not there yet. So if his tank improves and looks really good in preseason, he's one that's definitely worth looking at, because he'll get a CBA role, you would think. So, and then finally is Elliot Yeo. Too injury prone. I think he got injured in day one of preseason with his ankle. But yeah, the West Coast midfield, so who was it? It's probably Reid, Ginby, and Hewitt. And do they throw Yo and Duggan in there? I'm not too sure. But maybe they put Tim Kelly plus young kids is probably the way you would think they go about it. I don't know. Maybe they need a bit more senior depth in there, but they're definitely going to want to play the kids in there. So worth watching those. And then finally, the Western Bulldogs. Of course, the Bulldogs are always going to be relevant somehow. But yeah, James Harmes, a bit like Sydney, the Sydney recruits. How does this actually work? He's been kicked out of the midfield at Melbourne. He's probably been kicked out for a reason, because I do feel like they've been struggling for midfield depth. And where does Harmes fit in there? I mean, of all clubs to go to, it's the Dogs, who are playing McRae and Baz out of position. So he's 250k. So he's, if we're looking at like a Hewitt or a Dev Robertson or Elijah Sardis, these sort of players, he's sort of competing with those, but he's 28, 29. If he can refine some form, he can probably average 75 plus for us and have a little bit of mid-time. But yeah, I don't really know how this is going to work, and I don't have him in my team anymore, but look, he's worth watching. But it's an interesting one, but he hasn't played good footy for a while. I think that's probably the main concern, it's probably why I've taken him out my team. So we'll see how that goes. Jack McRae was a hard one to pick last year. He looked so good in the preseason, but now he's a forward. How does he fit in? I think the worrying thing is the trajectory. He's getting older. He's 29 now. It's going down. The mid-time's going down. The scoring is going down. Do they play him forward again? Do they opt for Baz to have more mid-time? I think it was still very silly to play Daniel over McRae in midfield. I think that's just borderline psychotic from Bevo, but it's nothing new with him. But you can sort of see why at times, McRae looks like he's lost a bit of a step and probably can lag a bit behind in transition. Not in the past, but maybe recently. So not the prime McRae that we've known and loved for many years, but still think you can offer something in the midfield. But will I be picking him for about 530, 540k? I'll probably skip and just wait and see on McRae. Just a bit of he has the injury game priced into him actually. He got concussed in the last round, but yeah, I just don't know. I don't know what Bevo's doing, so I'll probably pass on McRae for now. But yeah, don't know. And then Caleb Daniel mid forward. Well, I don't know what role he's playing, and he can get thrown around a bit, so he's a pass for me. And then you've got Bailey Smith, so yeah, pretty obvious to try and figure out what's happening here, and that is, well, if they don't play him inside mid, he's probably going to leave. But who knows with Bevo, so I guess, yeah, Baz is very much like, he's not a walk-up pick, he's just, let's see if he gets the role and holds it. So still got Bont, Libber, Treloar in there, so surely they can play Baz in there now. And young Riley Sanders, I think he'll be a great addition for the Dogs. They'll probably play him off half forward, so yeah, Sanders also probably the top ranked rookie, I think. So yeah, I think he should score better than Harley Reid, even if he plays at half forward. So Baz is a wait and see for me, so he's not in my current starting team. So yeah, I think that's about it from me. Thanks for listening, and yeah, we'll see you guys maybe in the new year, maybe when SuperCoach opens, might be the next video, but we'll see. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.